We finally made it. Opening day is upon us. By the time you see this video, it'll be just a couple hours before first pitch, or maybe you'll get to it after. But whatever the case, baseball, real baseball, games that matter are upon us. And the last couple of days of spring training were eventful. There were some roster moves that we should go over. We're going to take a look at the top highlight of the last week, maybe a couple of the best ones of the last week. Which players led the White Sox with different offensive categories. We're going to check in with the starting rotation. But we're also going to talk about some really unusual parts of baseball that are going to be changing really soon. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, but couldn't quite find a place for it. Opening day is here. The time is now. We always check in with the injured list, which first off, I've gone how many months of still calling it the DL, not the IL, the injured list. So I'm trying to correct myself there. But anyway, Eloy just had his surgery on Tuesday. As far as we're aware, everything went fine. And the timeline, as we're aware right now, is that he'll be reevaluated in about 3 months. So kind of need time for the swelling to go down and time for him to just begin his physical therapy before we can really get a good, clearer picture on when we can expect him back. And I forgot to mention Jace Fry a couple days ago when I was filling out the roster and talking about the players on the roster who are on the injured list. And Jace Fry is one. He had back surgery not all that long ago, but he is anticipated to be back possibly as soon as May, which seems kind of amazing. Definitely mid-season at the latest. And our bullpen is just filthy good, even with him on the injured list. A final look at our record. The White Sox finished the spring with a record of 12-12-5, which I know so many people were so fearful at the beginning of the season. It took the White Sox like a week to win game number 1, another half a week to win game number 2. And look at this, they ended up finish at 500. It is still fun to see the White Sox win some games, and hopefully that's bring some positivity into the beginning of the season. The first roster move that was announced was the White Sox confirming that Andrew Vaughn would be on the opening day roster. I think the biggest surprise when looking at the final roster moves that happened right at the very end of spring training was that Jonathan Lucroy. We had heard at the very beginning Tony wanted Lucroy on the team, and some pitchers had been giving him good endorsements that he's a good catcher. He was told that he will not make the opening day roster, and at which point Lucroy requested his release. White Sox granted it, which opened the space that Zach Collins will be the primary backup catcher, sometime DH, and also Yermin Mercedes is making the roster. To the delight of many of you, I don't really know how Yermin is going to be exactly utilized so far, but I think one of the main reasons that he is making this roster, it allows Yasmani Grandal to be the starting catcher and for Collins to be in the same lineup at DH. It's a weird baseball rule that you can't move your DH into a position. So if for whatever reason Grandal needed to be replaced in the game, we wouldn't have a catcher. Now we have Yermin, so he will be the almost an emergency backup catcher in a way. Of course, he'll get some pinch hit at bats. He provides a lot of power off the bench and in the right situation. The other surprise was the addition of Jake Lamb. Now, I was living in Arizona back when Jake Lamb was a monster at the dish for the Arizona Diamondbacks. He has not been that guy for a while. It was really nice to see him kind of have a resurgence last year with the Oakland A's. So it was a surprise to see Jake Lamb come in, which pushed Danny Mendick back to the minor leagues, and it also pushed Nick Turley out of our 40-man roster. And basically the reason he's on the team is that he is a defensive backup for Yoan Moncada. Hopefully there's no lingering issues. We saw him take several fouls off of his feet and legs in the last week. Hopefully there's nothing going on that we don't know about that really forces us to have a more capable and ready to go backup third baseman. But if we do need that on occasion, we need to give Moncada a couple of innings rest at the end of a game. We do have Jake Lamb to come in, step into that role. And finally, the last question about who would make the team was going to be the final bullpen arm, and we guessed it a couple of days ago as we put our predictions out, and it is Jose Ruiz. Again, that last spot is going to be a revolving door of whoever is performing the best in the minor leagues. Taking a look at the schedule ahead, the White Sox open against the Anaheim Angels. As Chicagoans, we will be seeing these games pretty late at night, so I know some people are upset about that. All 4 games are night games, and they're on West Coast time, so it's really going to be pretty late for us. However, the White Sox do have the honor of being the first Sunday night baseball game as they take on the Angels on ESPN. The road trip continues up to Seattle for 3 games before finally coming home for the home opener against the Royals on the 8th. One thing to pay attention to in the Angels series is Shohei Ohtani, who is scheduled to start against the White Sox over the weekend, and his last spring start was abbreviated because he was pulled from the game with a blister on his pitching hand. We will have to see if that's a nagging injury that will affect our game. There's 2 unusual issues to talk about before the season begins. First off, Major League Baseball is using a new ball. It really is the same ball, but From what I've read, the stitches are slightly looser. The bounce of the ball is slightly reduced. So whether it's the ball off the bat or the impact of the ball hitting the ground, they're not going to bounce as high. And for pitchers, the stitching actually feels a little bit bigger, so they might be able to get a better grip on the ball. The result of this through 1 month of action is that spring training games were averaging about 9.5 runs, which is the lowest scoring output in the preseason since at least 2015. And on more than a run a game from 2019 when the average spring training game saw 10.5 runs scored per game. Also, home runs are down. I don't think we've been told exactly why they decided to take this route. Anytime Major League Baseball makes a change, it's about trying to get more fans to the game. Is the idea that home runs are kind of interesting, but they're also kind of boring, and they want more balls to be put into play so that there's more action on the field? That's my only guess, but we will see how that pans out. I would assume that the Players Union would be very against the next thing I'm going to talk about, but we haven't heard anything publicly yet, which is that Major League Baseball is going to be testing for foreign substances used on baseballs. And so that is the idea that a pitcher might have something sticky on their hat or on their jersey, on their shirt, that they can then rub on the ball to get a better grip, increase that spin rate, which increases the movement of the pitch. How are they going to test? They'll be pulling balls randomly from the game and sending them off to an independent lab to be tested. They also will be examining pitcher spin rates, comparing the current season to past seasons, which doesn't make a lot of sense because if a pitcher has been using an illegal foreign substance in the past, we're not going to see any change here. So you're only going to catch somebody that just started experimenting with it. And the end result is that a pitcher will be penalized somehow. We have not heard at all how. Will they be warned first? Will they be suspended? Will it be financial? We have no idea what the punishment side of it is going to be. In my mind, how the league should deal with it is that you approve one substance, you supply it to all the clubs. That way, it's an even playing field. All pitchers, you can use this and nothing else, and it's optional. You don't have to use it, but you can't use anything else. Then at least it creates an even playing field. And unlike using steroids, you're not putting yourself in physical danger, whereas you would do that with PEDs. The reality is, as we've heard over and over again, 90 to 99% of all pitchers do use this foreign substance. So it is going to drastically change the game. If they really need to get rid of it for whatever reason, I would phase it out in some way, having a hard line drawn, and then you have basically everybody's pitching staff, 99% of the pitchers in the league suspended for a week. That's going to look really bad. The upside for Major League Baseball in removing this substance is that I think more balls will be put into play. Pitches won't have as much movement on them. Again, the idea is generating more action on the field. If you were the league, what would you do about it? So I would say that the biggest highlight of the week was Dylan Cease's performance on the last spring training game of the year. Unfortunately, I can't make that a video highlight because that was not televised, which is a bummer because Dylan Cease was dominant. I just was saying how Dylan Cease has never been dominant. Well, he must have heard me because he threw 5 innings, struck out 11 people, and walked 0. Control has been the biggest issue for Cease. It's really dogged him and gotten in the way of his productivity. But if he can throw anything like he did a couple of days ago and not issue free passes, oh man, we are sitting really pretty at the number 4 spot in our rotation. There were 2 home runs hit in the last week that they each deserve to be a co-highlight of the week. And one is Danny Mendick. I guess this is a little bit of a send-off until we see him back in the big leagues again. Danny Mendick against the Cubs just absolutely crushed this home run to left field. So hard that even little Danny Mendick got to admire the sail of the ball through the air a little bit as he ran to first base. And of course, the scariest moment that became a highlight was Yoan Moncada fouling a ball off of his shin really hard. He was down on the ground for probably a good 5 minutes. Reminded me of when Jermaine Dye, still playing for the Oakland A's, fouled one off of his shin and then ended up breaking his leg in the process. So I was nervous as he was writhing around in pain. He gets back up after a 10-pitch at-bat. The next pitch he saw did this. Over the wall, over the berm, into the next field. It was just a thing of beauty. So one last look at some spring stats. We've been looking at the catching battle, and the battle is resolved. All the catchers cooled off a little bit as the spring went on, most likely because they ended up seeing more big league pitchers by the end of the spring compared to the beginning of the spring, where they might see some very, very inexperienced young arms that had no chance of making the team. Zach Collins finished 13 for 44. Add in some power and a good eye, yielded a 903 on base plus slugging. He had a double, 3 homers, and eerily 6 runs, 6 RBIs, 6 walks, and 6 strikeouts. Jonathan Lucroy, who was released, ended up 6 for 18, just the 1 double. but did walk 5 times and only struck out once. Yermin Mercedes really did go down as the spring went on. He finished 13 for 47 with a 6.74 on base plus slugging. He hit 3 doubles, but no home runs, scored 4 runs, drove in 8, walked 4 times, but struck out 12 times. Of course, it's always fun to celebrate the guys that are having a great spring, but we should keep an eye, especially on the brink of opening day, who didn't do that great this past spring. I think you'd have to put Jose Abreu on that list. He only batted .233 with a 6.69 on base plus slugging, and it wasn't for lack of playing time because he picked up 60 at-bats and only logged 3 extra base hits, 2 doubles, and 1 home run. Fortunately, the home run came at the very end of spring, so maybe he's turning it on right now. And Luis Robert only mustered a .204 average, 6.04 on base plus slugging across 54 at-bats. He picked up 4 doubles and 1 home run. Am I worried about these players? Not really. Obviously, Luis Robert is growing and becoming better and better, and we're watching it in front of our eyes. And for comparison's sake, Jose Abreu in 2020, last year, in spring training, he batted .257 with an on-base plus slugging, almost the same at 6.87. So we see Jose didn't have a great spring that year either, and if you might remember, he had a pretty good year. And I should mention Yasmani Grandal did not look exceptional, but of course his biggest issue was coming back from a knee injury. So that was really the most important part of his spring. He did end up managing just 7 hits and all of them were singles. Let's get back to some really fun news, and that would be by looking at the starting pitchers. In order of their anticipated rotation spot, Lucas Giolito ended with a 1.17 ERA. He allowed 2 home runs, didn't hit anyone, walked 10, mostly early in the spring, struck out 30, and opponents batted just 130 against him. Microscopic numbers. Dallas Keuchel got a very late start on the spring and had a smaller sample size, but he looked great by the end. His net totals were a 5.56 ERA across 11 1/3 innings. The ground ball pitcher did not allow a home run. He hit 1 batter, walked 2, struck out 8, and allowed just a .244 batting average against. Lance Lynn put up some very Lance Lynn-like numbers, 3.24 ERA across 16 2/3 innings. He did give up 3 home runs, hit 1 batter, walked 9, struck out 21, and allowed a .222 batting average against him. For most of the spring, Dylan Cease was lucky. Of course, by the last game, he was dominant, and that ended up with a 1.06 ERA across 17 innings. He allowed just 1 home run, hit 2 batters, walked 17, and struck out 22. Opponents only batted .213 against him. And of course, Carlos Rodon, one of the feel-good stories of the spring, ended with a 1.32 ERA, 1 home run allowed, didn't hit a batter, only walked 1, struck out 16, and opponents only batted 184 against him. He is still healthy entering the first game of the season. Now let's take one last quick look at our spring leaders. Most hits on the team was Tim Anderson with 20 across 62 plate appearances. Andrew Vaughn had 17, but he needed a few more plate appearances to do that. Moncada had 16, Eaton and Eloy with 15, and finally Jose Abreu with those 14 hits, but again, it took him 71 plate appearances for 14 hits. Total bases, TA leads this category as well with 29. Moncada and Vaughn had 28. We will definitely be missing Eloy. He had 25. And look at Adam Engel there, just 36 plate appearances to gather 24 total bases. Finally, Zach Collins collected 23 across 50 plate appearances. On base plus slugging is led by Adam Engel, who was just on a tear at the very end before he got injured. 944, barely ahead of Yoan Moncada. Zach Collins was also over 900. Then Eloy, Eaton, TA, and Vaughn. It took a long time for the White Sox to start gathering multi-home run players, but Collins and Engel ended up tied for the lead with 3. And finally, our stolen bases. Is Luis going to go nuts like this all year? 6 stolen bases to lead the team, and most of those came at the very end. And Billy Hamilton, in a very short sample size with the White Sox, ended up with 3 steals. Tim Anderson also had 2. I know the headline for a lot of people nationally is that the White Sox no longer have Eloy Jimenez, and listen, we all know that that hurts, but there are so many other great elements of this team. The pitching staff might be the best in all of baseball, especially if you consider the bullpen and the starting rotation. Just superb players. The White Sox are also a very fast team, which doesn't get a lot of attention, but I mean, how many infield singles have we seen Tim Anderson or Luis Robert beat out? We've seen Adam Eaton do that a little bit this spring. Of course, we know Adam Engel is super fast. Billy Hamilton is elite, like crazy speed. Nick Madrigal, Leury Garcia, also fast runners. There's a lot to like about this team. There's a lot of ways the White Sox are going to generate offense, even with Eloy's big bat out of the lineup. One last spring note to mention is that we did see a few innings of Andrew Vaughn playing left field, and I do have to say I like what I saw. Why do I like it? Because it was unspectacular. I believe Vaughn is going out there with explicit instructions to not go crazy. If a ball is hit to you, catch it. Don't dive. Don't try to climb a wall. Just man the position. You're holding down the fort for 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks at most, when Adam Engel is going to come back, and then Vaughn will probably switch into a DH role. It's also going to be very interesting to see between now and when Engel comes back, how often do we actually see Andrew Vaughn in left field. It'll be a game-by-game basis. We're all going to be watching that lineup announcement at the beginning of a game with bated breath to see who the heck is playing where. But at the end of the day, who cares? We're going to be watching and cheering on our White Sox. So this time I mean it. Play ball and go Sox.